At sunrise, Boon Carter pulled 2 children from the freezing river. They weren't his, they weren't local, but they were small, shivering, and nearly lost in the current. Now, 12 hours later, they were drawing in the dirt outside his cabin. Over and over the same symbol. Their small hands moved with quiet urgency. It wasn't a game. They should have been grateful, or at least frightened. But they weren't either. They just kept glancing east, like they were waiting, for someone, for something. The girl, maybe 8, wouldn't stop checking the leather. Pouch around her neck. She'd open it, peek in, then snap it shut again. Like she needed to make sure whatever was inside hadn't slipped away in the flood. The boy was younger, but his eyes felt older. Boon didn't like how he looked at him. Like he knew things Boon didn't. Like he'd seen this exact moment before. When the storm broke just before dawn, Boon thought the worst had passed. He was wrong, because just as the first sunlight reached his porch, he heard it. Hoofbeats, 100 of them. Not scattered, rhythmic, heavy, coordinated. The kids stopped drawing. They didn't look scared. They looked like they'd been expecting it. And that's when Boon realized that symbol they'd scratched into the earth wasn't random. It was a message, maybe a warning. But who it was meant to help, him or someone else, he wasn't sure yet. He stepped inside and pulled down his rifle from above the door. His fingers trembled as he checked the chamber. 3 bullets, 3. The children stood frozen now, silent, listening to the ground rumble. The girl clutched her pouch tighter. The boy moved to the window, pressing his face to the glass. Boon pulled. "Him back." "Get away from there," he whispered. But it was too late. He saw them. Riders cresting the ridge, more than he could count. Dust trailing behind them in a long, snaking cloud, and leading them, tall and proud, was a man Boon didn't know but instantly understood. He was someone. Boon had lived on this land 8 years, ever since Ruth passed. He'd kept to himself, traded fair, respected borders, never caused trouble. So why now? He looked at the kids again. They were why. He'd pulled them from the river, wrapped them in blankets, fed them from what little he had left. And now their people were here. The girl stepped forward and gently touched Boon's arm. She looked up at him, those dark eyes steady, and pointed to the dirt. The symbol was clearer now. 3 wavy lines crossed by 1 straight stroke. Boon crouched beside it. Maybe the waves were the river. Maybe the line was his fence or the road, or a warning not to cross. The hoofbeats grew louder. Minutes away now. The boy tugged Boon's sleeve and pointed to the back of the house, then the cellar door. He covered his eyes, then pointed to himself and his sister. He wanted to hide, but Boon didn't move. Hiding made it look like he'd done something wrong. How do you explain to 100 riders that you rescued their children, not took them? The E. Girl stepped toward the front door. She placed her small hand flat against it, then looked back at Boon with a calm that didn't belong to someone her age. She didn't want to run. She wanted to meet whatever was coming. The ground shook now. Boon felt it in his boots, the sound of leather and steel, the snort of horses ready for war. Then he saw him, the man at the front, feathers in his hair, a steady hand on the reins, a gaze locked onto Boon's cabin. He didn't know if Boon was a savior or a thief. The lead warrior raised one arm, and 100 horses stopped, all at once. The silence that followed was worse than the thunder of their arrival. Boon stepped out, onto his porch, rifle low but in plain sight. He wasn't hiding. He made the choice to meet them like a man, not cower behind a locked door. The children stood beside him, the girl on his right, the boy on his left. Their presence felt like both protection and accusation. The warrior at the front dismounted in one smooth motion. He was younger than Boon expected, maybe mid-30s, with arms marked by old battle scars. His eyes swept over Boon's cabin, the old garden Ruth once tended, the fence line, the corral. Every inch of Boon's life was being measured, and when those dark eyes finally landed on Boon, he felt it, the weight of judgment. This was a man who didn't ask twice, a man whose silence carried more power than a shout. But when the chief saw the children, something in him broke. His stern expression fell away. For a moment he wasn't a warrior. He was just a father. The girl ran to him, calling out in words Boon didn't understand, but the meaning was clear enough. "Papa!" The chief dropped to one knee and wrapped his arms around both children. He pulled them close, whispering something soft in their language, his voice shaking just enough to be human. Behind him, a few warriors loosened their grips on their weapons. The moment passed quickly. The chief stood, face hardening again as he looked back at Boon. "I am Kestrel of the Northern Wind," he said in careful English. "These are my children." "I'm Boon Carter," Boon replied. "I pulled them from the river yesterday during the storm." Kestrel's eyes narrowed. "My children do not go near the river alone. They know better." The words lingered like smoke. If they didn't go on their own, who took them? Kestrel. Didn't have to say it. His warriors were already thinking it. The white rancher nearest the water. Before Boon could speak, the girl stepped forward. She spoke fast and serious, pointing toward the river, the sky, and finally toward Boon. He couldn't understand the words, but she was telling the story. Everything now rested in the hands of an 8-year-old. Kestrel listened, unmoving. Then he knelt, and she opened the leather pouch she'd kept close since the moment he found her. Inside was a small piece of carved bone. Kestrel took it carefully. His face went pale. He turned it over once. Then again. Whatever he saw there changed him. His breath, his posture, even the set of his shoulders shifted. He stood slowly, and the way he looked at Boon now was different. Not angry, not grateful either, just different. Older, wiser, more dangerous. "Where exactly did you find my children?" he asked, voice quiet. "About 2 miles downstream," Boon said. "Near Devil's Bend." Kestrel's jaw locked. Devil's Bend is sacred ground. No one goes there, especially not children. He looked down at the bone again, as if it might speak. "Someone sent them there," Kestrel said. "Someone who wanted them to find this." He held the carving high for his warriors to see. Boon noticed several shift uneasily in their saddles. Soft words passed between them. Whatever this was, it mattered. "This belonged to my father," Kestrel said. "He died 3 winters ago, buried with his things, at Devil's Bend, as is our way." Boon felt his gut tighten. "Your children." "Found this, in a grave." Kestrel shook his head. "Not found. Led to. Someone told them where to dig. Someone who knew our ways, our sacred places, our language, and our dead." The realization hit Boon like a blow to the chest. Someone had used the children, sent them straight into a sacred grave, knowing they'd get caught in the storm, knowing they'd need rescue, knowing exactly which man lived closest to that stretch of river. "You think I sent them there?" Boon asked, voice barely steady. "No," Kestrel said plainly. "You're not clever enough for such a plan. And your eyes don't lie when you speak of pulling them from the water." Kestrel stepped closer, the carved bone still resting in his palm. "But someone wants me to believe you did. Someone who knows that if a white rancher's caught with my father's grave marker, blood must be paid." Boon's throat went dry. "Blood payment? Our law is clear," Kestrel said. "Disturb a chief's resting place and your life is forfeit." Behind him, the warriors murmured their agreement like a wave rolling through the crowd. "That's why they chose this bone," Kestrel continued. "They wanted me to ride here with 100 warriors and kill you on sight." The girl tugged, her father's sleeve, speaking quickly in their tongue. She pointed toward the hills behind Boon's land, making a motion, hands over her eyes, then toward the trees. Kestrel's expression darkened. "Ayana says someone followed them to the river, a man on horseback. She thought he was hunting, but now she thinks he was watching, making sure they found what he planted." Boon pieced it together aloud. "And made sure they nearly drowned, so I'd be forced to pull them out." "Forced to bring that bone into my house," Kestrel nodded. "Turning you into a thief without ever knowing." Boon dragged a hand through his hair, trying to make sense of it all. "Someone wanted you to kill me, but why?" "That," Kestrel said, turning to face the hills, "is what we must discover." He barked a command to his warriors, and half of them wheeled their horses around and rode off toward the trees, following Ayana's direction. "You believe them?" Boon asked. "Ayana has her grandmother's eyes. She notices what others miss." He looked to his son. "And Takakota. He remembers everything. The boy was staring down at the symbol they'd drawn in the dirt. He looked up, quiet, then spoke. In halting English. "Man had scar here," he said, dragging a finger down his left cheek. Kestrel froze. "What did you say?" he asked. "Scarman told us. Grandfather's spirit. Calling from river." Kestrel's hands clenched. Behind him, more warriors reached for their weapons. "You know who that is," Boon said, watching Kestrel's face change. "Yes," Kestrel growled. "And if I'm right, this was never about you at all." A rider returned from the hills at full gallop, shouting something urgent. Kestrel listened closely, and his face darkened. "They found tracks," he told Boon. "One rider, iron shoes, headed east toward Millfield." Boon knew that town. 2 days' ride. That's where land disputes were settled, where government men handled claims and paperwork. "Who's the man with the scar?" he asked. Kestrel didn't answer right away. He looked down at his children like he was memorizing their faces. Finally he spoke, his voice low and full of old pain. "His name is Marcus Gann. He was a translator during the treaty negotiations." 5 years ago. "Was," Boon echoed. "Until." "We found out he was twisting our words. The treaties we signed, ones we thought protected our hunting grounds, actually gave away our rights to the river. And our sacred places." Boon's mind reeled. "Devil's Bend included," Kestrel nodded. "We protested, but the officials said we agreed. It was Gann's word against ours." He lifted the carved bone again, holding it in the morning light. "But my father..." "He was there for every meeting. He kept records, our language, our words, and they were buried with him. Now it made sense. This bone," Kestrel said, "bears markings that point to those records. Gann knows if anyone finds them, his lies fall apart." Boon took a slow breath. "So he lured your children to the grave and used me to cover his tracks." Kestrel's eyes narrowed, his voice iron flat. "He tried to make me your executioner, just to hide his betrayal. He wanted the only witness gone, and the sacred ground left undisturbed forever." Kestrel looked toward the east, toward Millfield, where Gann would have claimed more tribal land, one forged paper at a time. Ayana tugged her father's arm and whispered, "Something urgent." Kestrel's jaw tightened. "What did she say?" Boon asked. "Gann told them," Kestrel said quietly, "if they brought the bone to the white rancher by the river, their grandfather's spirit would rest." His voice lowered to a flat, deadly calm. He used their love for their grandfather to make them part of his plan. A sound rose over the ridge, hooves again, but this time no threat. The warriors Kestrel had sent to the hills were returning, and they weren't alone. Between 2 riders sat a man on a weary horse, hands tied behind him. Even from the porch, Boon could see the long scar down his cheek. Marcus Gann hadn't made it to Millfield after all. As the group approached, Gann's eyes darted from Kestrel to Boon, weighing the odds. When he spoke, his tone was smooth. Smooth. "Chief Kestrel," he called. "I've been searching for your children all night. Thank God they're safe." Kestrel stepped forward, and every warrior nearby stood a little straighter. "You've been searching for them?" "Of course," Gann said easily. "When the storm rolled in, I feared they might be out in it. I've been riding since dawn, checking every homestead between here and the township. It might have sounded reasonable, if not for Ayana's sharp memory and Takakota's quiet truth." Kestrel stopped just an arm's reach from the bound man. "My son says you spoke to them yesterday," he said. "Told them their grandfather was calling from the river." Gann's mask flickered. A hint of hesitation. "Children imagine things," he said, shrugging. "Especially during storms. Maybe the boy misunderstood." "Show him," Kestrel said. One of the warriors stepped up and pulled open Gann's saddlebags. Inside, documents from the territorial office, surveying tools, and a pouch just like the one Ayana had carried. Inside it were more carved bones. Gann's face drained of color as Kestrel removed them one by one, each etched with markings from sacred burial sites. "I can explain," Gann said quickly. "I found these near the riverbank. I was bringing them to you. I figured they had meaning." Kestrel held one of the bones up, letting the sun hit it as he slowly turned it in his hand. "This one belonged to my grandfather's grandfather," he said softly. It hasn't touched daylight in 60 years. Then, his voice dropped to a whisper sharp enough to cut. You've been robbing graves, and that's not— Be silent. The command snapped through the air, cutting Gan off mid-breath. Kestrel turned to his son. Dakota, tell this man what he said to you yesterday. The boy stepped forward. His voice was calm, but steady. Scarman said grandfather's bones make strong medicine for white settlers. Said bring them to Rancher, we get reward. Said grandfather wants bones to help his grandchildren. Gan's lies began to crumble across his face. The boy's confused, he muttered. He doesn't understand— Ayana, Kestrel said. What else did this man say? The girl stood tall. Her English was careful, measured. He said you'd be proud, said bringing bones to white man meant we trust. Make peace. Boon felt his stomach turn. The manipulation was as cruel as it was clever. Gan hadn't just used the children. He used their love, their hope, twisted it. Boon stepped forward, anger rising like heat. You used those kids to rob graves, he said. Made them believe they were honoring their grandfather. Made them think they were helping their people. He took another step. And all the while, you were setting me up to die for your lies. You don't understand the complexities of territorial law, Gan said, his voice curling with that smug tone again. These artifacts don't belong underground. They belong in museums. Kestrel didn't raise his voice, just asked, calm and low, whose history? Gan didn't hesitate. American history, civilized history. That word, civilized, landed like a slap. Gan didn't stop. This land's going to be developed. It's inevitable. These primitive customs can't stand in the way of progress forever. A few of Kestrel's warriors raised their weapons, but Kestrel held up a hand. Not yet. You forged treaties, Boon said. Changed translations, stole land. I corrected translations, Gan replied firmly. Made them reflect the truth of territorial expansion. What was happening anyway? And when Chief Kestrel's father kept records that proved you were lying, Boon asked. Gan turned toward Kestrel. Your father was a stubborn old man, couldn't accept that his way of life was ending. Silence, the kind of silence that comes right before a storm breaks. Boon saw Kestrel's hand inch toward his knife, his entire body stiff with barely held fury. But before the tension snapped, a shout rang out from one of the scouts near the tree line. Riders coming! Everyone turned. Uniformed men, territorial officials, rode in from the east, dust trailing behind them. Gan's expression shifted from arrogance to almost relief. There, he said, proper authorities. This'll be settled lawfully. Kestrel didn't flinch. He looked at the approaching officials, then back at the carved bones in his hand. Perhaps, he said, but first they'll hear what you've done. Gan sneered. My word against a bunch of savages and a dirt-poor rancher? He laughed. I don't think so. But his voice cracked a little when Boon pulled a folded paper from his pocket. The survey notice, still bearing Gan's name, his signature. Proof of his authority and his involvement. The territorial officials rode into the clearing like men used to being listened to. Their leader, a broad-shouldered man with silver hair and a heavy badge, took one look around and dismounted. Commissioner Walsh, he called out. We received reports of an armed standoff. I expect an explanation. Gan lifted his chin, hands still bound behind his back. Commissioner, thank God, I've been taken prisoner. These people, these tribesmen, are threatening me over a misunderstanding about a few artifacts. Walsh's eyes moved from Gan to the children, to the carved bones in Kestrel's hand. You were supposed to file your survey reports yesterday, Walsh said. When you didn't show, we came looking. As you can see, Gan said, twisting his bonds, I've been detained against my will. Kestrel stepped forward, holding up one of the bones so Walsh could see. This man has been robbing our sacred burial grounds, he said. He used my children, manipulated them into desecrating the resting place of our chiefs. That's ridiculous, Gan snapped. They're just trying to disrupt lawful land assessments. Walsh held up a hand. Then he leaned in, examining the bones. His expression shifted. These do appear to be significant, he muttered. Mr. Gan, are these part of your documented archaeological finds? I found them scattered by the river, Gan said smoothly. I was bringing them to the proper channels for cataloguing. Before he could finish, Boon stepped forward. He held out the survey notice, still signed by Dyson, still stained from where it had hung on his fence. The lie was unraveling, and this time in front of the law. "Commissioner," Boon said, stepping forward, "this document has Mr. Gann's signature. It authorizes a land survey on my property for potential territorial acquisition." Walsh took the paper, scanning it carefully. "This is official," he said, "signed and dated." "The survey was supposedly conducted yesterday," Boon added. "But Mr. Gann says he was out all night searching for children and found these artifacts by accident this morning." The contradiction was clear. Walsh looked up, his gaze shifting between the paper and Gann. "Mr. Gann," he asked, "when exactly did you conduct this survey?" Gann hesitated. "There may be some confusion about the timing." "There's no confusion," Ayana said, her voice clear. "Scarman came to our camp 3 days ago, told us to take grandfather's bones to the white man by the river, Walsh's." Attention snapped to her. "You're saying Mr. Gann visited your village 3 days ago?" "Yes," Takakota added. "Before the storm. He said the bones would bring peace." Walsh's jaw tightened. "Mr. Gann, if you were at their village 3 days ago, how do you explain conducting a survey yesterday? The one that supposedly stopped you from looking for them?" Gann's smooth confidence faltered. "The children. How mistaken. They were lost, frightened. Their memories are confused." "Both children?" Walsh asked. "With the same confusion?" Kestrel's voice was low but steady. "There's more you should see." One of the warriors stepped forward, handing Walsh a bundle taken from Gann's saddlebag. Maps of other burial sites, sketches of tribal grounds, and a list, not just any list. A detailed ledger showing which officials had accepted payments to ignore irregularities. Walsh flipped through the pages and the color drained from his face. His name wasn't there, but several of his colleagues were. "Mr. Gann," he said slowly, "these documents outline a pattern of fraud, grave robbery, and corruption." "They're just research notes," Gann said quickly. "Academic study of native customs," but it was too late. The lies didn't hold anymore. The artifacts, the forged treaties, the bribes. It was all too much to explain away. Walsh looked up with the expression of a man who had just found a snake in his own camp. "Mr. Gann," he said, "you're under arrest for fraud, theft, and tampering with territorial proceedings." Walsh's men stepped forward, binding Gann's wrists with official restraints. But Gann wasn't done. "Commissioner, you're making a mistake," he said sharply. "These savages—" "Enough," Walsh said. "They've clearly turned the rancher against us," Gann continued, desperate now. "They're trying to stop territorial expansion." Walsh held up the list. "Your handwriting, your signature, payment records with your name. The children's testimony is detailed and consistent." "Children can be coached," Gann spat. "Who?" Walsh asked. "A rancher who barely leaves his land? A chief who didn't know about any of this until this morning?" Gann's face twisted in fury. "Fine," he snapped. "Yes, I changed some translations. I was protecting American interests. These people, these savages, don't understand progress." The words hit the clearing like a thunderclap. Kestrel stepped forward, calm and cold. "Commissioner Walsh," he said, "your laws are clear. This man confessed to theft, fraud, and the desecration of sacred sites. What is the punishment?" Walsh met his eyes. "Prison." "Mr. Gann will stand trial in territorial court," Walsh said. "He'll likely serve years for his crimes. And for the lands he stole with false treaties." "That'll take time," he added uneasily. "Legal review, investigation. Determining which agreements were corrupted won't be quick." Kestrel's voice was quiet. "And while you review your papers, my people remain without homes, on land where their ancestors rest." Walsh had no answer. Then Boon spoke. Before he'd even fully thought it through. What if there was another way? Both men turned to him. "My land borders the river. 3 miles of grazing land. Water rights. Devil's Bend," Boon said, eyes on Kestrel. "I never asked to own sacred ground." Walsh narrowed his eyes. "What are you suggesting?" "A trade. My boundary touches theirs already. Instead of years of court battles, we just fix the lines. Give back what was taken through fraud." Kestrel studied Boon for a long moment. "You'd give up your land?" Boon nodded. "It was never rightfully mine, and I don't need all that river frontage, never did." Walsh asked gently, "But where would you live?" Boon glanced at the little cabin, the empty corral. "I've been alone on this ranch 3 years, ever since my wife passed. Maybe it's time I found a different way to live." Ayana tugged at her father's sleeve and whispered something in their language. Kestrel listened, then smiled. For the first time since arriving, "My daughter asks if the man who saved her life would consider becoming family." Boon's chest tightened. "Family? A place in our village," Kestrel said. "Work that matters. Children who trust you, and a chance to help stop future Marcus Gans from ever rising again," Walsh exhaled slowly. "A voluntary land transfer would avoid a dozen court hearings and bring peace." "Mr. Carter, are you sure?" Boon looked one last time at his old fence line, at the place he'd called home through the loneliest years of his life. "Commissioner, I've never been more sure of anything." 3 months later, Boon sat near the river, at Devil's Bend, watching Ayana and Takakota play in the shallow water under their grandmother's careful eye. The burial ground had been restored, the sacred objects returned. The children now swam in the calmer pools upstream without fear. Marcus Gan was behind bars, serving 5 years for fraud, theft, and corruption. His treaties had been thrown out. The stolen land returned to Kestrel's people. 3 other officials named in his ledgers had been dismissed. Boon's old cabin stood empty now, but Kestrel suggested keeping it as a neutral meeting place for future talks between tribal leaders and territorial officials, a new chapter of honest negotiation. "You're thinking again," Kestrel said, settling beside him on the grass. "Just remembering," Boon murmured. "The storm, the choice." "You saved more than 2 lives, Kestrel said, watching the children laugh in the water. "So you saved a burial ground. You exposed a lie. You saved the truth." "I only did what anyone would do," Boon replied. Kestrel's voice turned firm. "No. What you did took courage. Not just to leap in that river, but to trust 100 warriors at your door, and to give up land you could have fought to keep." Boon smiled. "Best decision I ever made." And it was. His new life had given him something he hadn't known he was missing. Purpose. He helped draft trade agreements. He taught Ayana and Takakota to read and write English. They taught him their language in return. Kestrel called him a bridge builder, someone who helped both peoples understand each other. "Papa Boon," Ayana called, "come see what we found." He and Kestrel walked to the river's edge. The children knelt in the sand beside a small depression. "It's a turtle nest," Takakota announced proudly. "Grandmother says babies hatch when the leaves change." "Just like we were," Ayana added, smiling. "In the water, waiting to be rescued." Boon knelt beside the tiny eggs. New life, buried in the earth. Waiting. "Sever the right moment to begin. We'll have to protect them," he said. "Make sure they're safe when the time comes." "Just like you protected us," Ayana whispered, taking his hand. Kestrel placed a hand on Boon's shoulder. "Come. The council meeting starts soon. They want your thoughts on the new trading post." As they walked back toward the village, Boon glanced over his shoulder. Children laughing, sacred ground honored. 2 peoples, once on the edge of war, now learning to trust. The 100 warriors who came for blood had found justice instead. And the rancher who had lived alone for 3 years had found a family. Sometimes salvation came riding on a storm. Sometimes the river washed away more than dirt. Sometimes pulling 2 children from the water was the first step in healing. A broken land. If you felt something during this story, tap the video on your screen now to watch another unforgettable tale from the American frontier, where courage and compassion collide. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Every bit of support helps us keep sharing stories that deserve to be remembered.